on the Go. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Sisters on the Go 3 as well. As promised, like I said, we have another guest, a special guest in the building. Miss Tafara Brown is in the building. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're gonna learn some special things about her. So Miss Brown, I'm gonna let you go ahead and take it away and go ahead and introduce yourself this evening.
How y'all doing? Thank you to everybody that's tuning in. I'm really honored to be here. My name is Tafara Brown. I grew up about 3.5-ish hours south of Atlanta in this little town called Ocilla, Georgia, Irvine County. So I'm a country girl through and through. Went to the University of Georgia. I currently work as a technology consultant, so I love all things tech, all things computers. But I also have a love for the arts. I come from a musical family. My father's been playing music about 50 years. My mother's a singer, choir director, so I come from a legacy of art and creativity. And I am really excited to just be here. I love the energy. I love the fact that we have a platform here to just share our stories and really encourage and inspire each other. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. And I want to ask you as well, when did you start, I want to say, writing poetry, decided, getting into spoken word?
Yeah.
When did that kind of start for you?
So I started performing original poetry in around 2013 because I'd always, so my mother taught English for about 20 years and my grandmother was an English teacher also, so I grew up reading from a very, very young age, so I always had a love and an appreciation for poetry, but I didn't start writing my words just from my heart until I started college. So yeah, that happened around 2013. I was part of an organization as a young person called 4-H, and they, give you an opportunity to choose a project. And for me, it was performing arts. So I, would write spoken word, and I would also play my saxophone. I've been playing saxophone for about 15 years now.
Oh wow!
So, but again, to actually write things that were completely from my heart, from my own experiences. Me going to college and really kind of stepping into my own really sparked that for me. And so it's been a journey ever since then.
I'd love to hear it. So let me ask you this. What started you to, what I should say is what inspired you to write Honeysuckle? Where did that inspiration come from?
So the story behind Honeysuckle is, so when I was very young, my dad took it upon himself to really do some family research and really just try to understand more about where we come from and actually had the opportunity to we had a huge family reunion, found family members that we've been living down the street from and had no idea, this family gets scattered and things happen, so it was incredible. But in this process of doing this research, my dad found a story about his grandfather.
Oh, wow.
That my grandmother, it was a story that my grandmother took to her grave, that she never told my dad or any of my aunts and uncles what happened to her father, but he was killed in March of 1957. He was accused of being fresh with a white woman and was subsequently beat to death.
Oh,
And so my grandmother was the second oldest out of his 11 children. And so they had to leave town and they moved to the town where my dad was born a few years later. But again, this was a story that my dad never knew because my grandmother, he said that she probably didn't want my aunts and uncles, growing up hating white people, understanding what happened to their grandfather, just being murdered in cold blood for looking at a white woman. And we all are too familiar with that story, and unfortunately. And so as a young person, I don't think I really understood the magnitude of the story and what it meant. I mean, I knew it was significant. I knew it was important to my family, but growing up and really again, just coming into my own, trying to figure out how to walk in my identity, right, as a Black woman, as somebody who is carrying the story from my family. I just started to write. I started to write these poems in honor of my great-grandfather, in dedication to my dad and other family members whose stories are documented in this work. I wanted to use it as an opportunity to honor this story, even though I didn't know my great-grandfather, and my, his children are still working and fighting, to just to bring his story to light. But I didn't feel, because that was their father, I didn't feel that was necessarily my place. But I wanted to take, the gift that I felt, God had given me and the platform that I had in my hand, to still honor him and still honor my family. And so that's how Honeysuckle came about.
Okay. So that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Like, so how is your emotions? How do you feel knowing the truth that your grandfather was killed all those years ago in reference to looking at a white woman? How do you feel about that today? Does that have any effect on you? How do you feel?
I mean, of course, like it's a gut-wrenching story, and it's for me. I feel a lot of different things. I feel, the grief, right? I can only imagine, right? Not only just the pain of what it was like losing him, but the fact that, especially in the Black community, we're so familiar with just loss and having to just pick back up and keep going. You got to swallow it, you got to keep going, you got to keep pushing, we can't just stop, and so as far as like my emotions, just reading the story, understanding it's heartbreaking, but then at the same time, I'm so encouraged and I'm so inspired by the resilience, right, of my family, and I think that really extends to just the resilience of the Black community in general. My hope is that this story can help us walk through that exercise of acknowledging our pain, right, acknowledging the loss, and honoring that story and being truthful about that. But then also using that as a stepping stone, right, to not only keep pushing, but hopefully encourage, any individual to look at their own stories and find their own ways, right, to perpetuate that healing. Whether, it's just through one-on-one conversations or a platform like this, or just, finding ways to get on social media or doing whatever you have to do to just get that truth out there. And that's really how I've been like processing just everything that's been going on. This story in particular, I feel like I have received so much healing, sharing it with my family and hearing how they've been impacted. And then also just sharing these stories with people in my network, my family, my friends, my coworkers. Everybody's been so supportive. Again, because my hope is that as I am, trying to feel that healing for myself, that as these stories go out, people can really just start to experience that healing for themselves too.
Love to hear it. So is there any thing in particular that you would like to share some content from Honeysuckle with us tonight?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
So it's one poem I would like to share. It's called War No More. And I wrote this in fall of 2014. This was right when the Mike Brown had just happened. And the story is that my mother and I were sitting and we were watching, the trial. And I was on Thanksgiving break, we were just eating together. And then it's like the whole mood in the room just changed, because the verdict was about to come out. And it was like I was holding on to hope for I was like, maybe just, his body laying there in the street for hours, however, maybe it won't be in vain, but then that not guilty verdict came out. And I just, was quiet, and then later I just lost it. I was furious, and so I wrote this as a conversation with Dr. King. Because at the time, of course, I was very angry, and I was challenging him on this concept of war no more, right? On this concept of, let's just, of kumbaya, because I wasn't feeling the kumbaya at that moment. So this is war no more. This is conversation with the late Dr. King. Dr. King, I respect your legacy, sure enough, yeah. Right now, sir, I just want to scream and I want to burn up somebody else's stuff. See, you preached war no more. Well, Pastor, I cannot take anymore. Like Othello was king of the Moors, I am black and I am regal and I am loved, but I am blinded by the kind of hatred that is turning me against myself and my kind. How can I say war no more when that is the chant of those who are too afraid to have their bodies laid out in plank formation in the streets like my ancestors in the ships en route from Mother Africa? How can I say war no more when every time I turn on my television, my vision is stained with the blood of my brothers and my lovers, and I cry because their blood cries out to God from the concrete floors of the jungles of New York City. Rest in power, Eric Garner. How can I say war no more when my birthright is a bullseye on my back and my inheritance is the receiving end of the Second Amendment? How can I say war no more when I was born to contend with a system? My baby sister's skin is as black as a clear Midsummer Night's Dream, and a ceasefire is just not enough to contain the fire that burns within me to fight for her, to help her bear the burden she did not ask to carry. You see, the burden of her broken crown is a little too much to bear when the wool of the Lamb of God is the texture of your kinky hair, like my Savior of whom you spoke, Dr. King. You preach peace in your pulpit. You said, like Jesus, I'm going to be silent on my way to the slaughter. You said his love was the remedy for the poison that's being injected into my self-image while my people are terminally ill from a lack of self-love. War no more sounds beautiful on a Sunday, but how do I bear the blood of my ancestors on a Monday if it's flowing through the streets on a Tuesday? If I am sitting in a church in Charleston, South Carolina, wiping innocent blood off of my Bible on a Wednesday, when I am shot for sleeping on my own bed on a Thursday, when I am killed for jogging in my neighborhood on a Friday, if I am calling out for my mama while the breath is being smothered out of me on a Saturday, until I am back in church begging God to forgive me for being black on a Sunday, maybe one day peace will be. But right now, Reverend, is nothing but a mirage in this desert of a nation America has come to be.
Yeah.
Woo!
Brown, I got my copy right here. Okay. For those who cannot see it, make sure you guys cop this. Okay. This got some powerful, powerful information, and exactly the one that she just performed is in here as well. So you might want to make sure that you get that. Mr. Farrah Brown, please let everyone know where they can find you.
You can find me on Facebook, Tafara Brown, Tifara Brown. Same thing, Instagram and Twitter, just at Tafara Brown.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much again for being a guest on our show. Like we said, it's all about broken silence, and I think she just broke the silence.
She broke the silence. Yes, yes.
That was dope.
Yeah.
She broke the silence.
All right, so we're going to keep it moving. We're going to go ahead into another quick break. But to get them tough crackers, and then we can...
Hey, English, cough them!
Ready?